The girl who crawled out of the river was already half dead, and the rancher standing on the bank with a lantern in one hand and a shotgun in the other couldn't decide which half to trust. Her dress had been white once, bridal silk, now shredded to rags by the current and stained rust brown, with blood from a gash across her temple. She dragged herself onto the mud and lay there shaking, fingers clawing into the earth like she was afraid the water might pull her back. Boone Sheridan had come down to check why the dogs were howling. He hadn't expected to find a woman dying on his riverbank at 2 in the morning, and he sure as hell hadn't expected what happened next, because when she pressed her bleeding hand against the neck of his oldest mare, the horse that hadn't eaten in 6 days stopped trembling and dropped her head to graze for the first time since the sickness started. If you want to know how a woman the whole territory called a witch became the only thing standing between a dying ranch and the man too stubborn to let it go, stay until the end. Drop a comment with where you're listening from so we can see how far this story reaches. Hit that like button, and let's get into it. Theda Kinney hadn't planned on ending up in the Powder River. She hadn't planned on much of anything after the morning Garrett Dunlap vanished from the hotel room in Casper with her grandmother's gold watch, the $900 she'd saved teaching piano for 3 years, and the marriage license she'd signed the night before, thinking she was building a future. The minister had been real, the license had been real. Garrett Dunlap had not. She found out at breakfast, sitting alone at a table set for 2, watching the hotel clerk's face shift from pity to suspicion, to contempt in the space of 30 seconds. "He's gone, ma'am. Checked out before dawn. Took the strongbox from the front desk, said you'd settle the bill." The bill was $47. Theda had 11 cents in her coat pocket, and a trunk full of wedding clothes she couldn't sell fast enough to cover it. By noon the sheriff had been called. Not for Garrett. Nobody cared about a swindler passing through, but for Theda, who couldn't pay and therefore must be part of the scheme. That's how it worked in these towns. The man disappeared. The woman stayed behind to absorb the blame. She'd run. Not proudly, not bravely, just desperately. Out the back door of the hotel, while the clerk argued with the deputy, through an alley that smelled like horse piss and coal smoke, across the rail yard where a brakeman shouted something she didn't catch. She'd walked for 2 days, sleeping in ditches, eating nothing, until the river appeared and the bridge was washed out, and she tried to ford it in the dark because stopping meant thinking, and thinking meant drowning in something worse than water. The current took her almost immediately, slammed her against a rock that opened her scalp, tumbled her downstream for what felt like a mile before spitting her onto a mudbank on Boone Sheridan's land. And now here she was, bleeding, barefoot, wearing a wedding dress the river had nearly torn off her body, with a stranger pointing a shotgun at her chest. "Who are you?" Boone's voice was low and flat, the kind of voice that had stopped expecting good answers a long time ago. "Nobody," Theda said. "I'm nobody. Nobody doesn't wash up on my property at 2 a.m. in a wedding dress. Try again, Theda Kinney." She sat up slowly, mud sucking at her hands. "I was supposed to get married in Casper. It didn't happen. I ended up in the river. That's the whole story." Boone studied her. He was tall, broad through the shoulders, somewhere past 35, with the kind of face that looked like it had been carved by wind and bad luck. Dark eyes set deep under heavy brows, a jaw that could have been chiseled from the same sandstone bluffs that lined the valley. "You're hurt," he said. "I noticed, that mare you touched." He nodded toward the horse, standing 20 feet away, calmly pulling grass from the riverbank. "She's been dying for a week. Wouldn't let me near her. Wouldn't eat," Vet said to put her down. Theda looked at the horse, old girl, gray around the muzzle, ribs showing through a dull coat, but her eyes were calm now, her breathing steady. Theda didn't understand it any more than he did. Her mother had been a midwife in Missouri who kept goats and mended broken birds and somehow always knew what was wrong with a sick creature before any doctor could name it. She'd taught Theda the same instinct, not magic, just attention. A way of feeling what an animal couldn't say. "Something's poisoning her," Theda said quietly. "Not disease. Something in what she's eating or drinking. I can feel it. Feel it. I know how that sounds. You sound crazy. Probably." Theda's vision blurred. The gash on her temple was still bleeding. "Can I sleep somewhere before I pass out? I'll leave in the morning." Boone Sheridan stood there for a long time, shotgun resting against his shoulder, lantern throwing shadows across his weathered face. Behind him the ranch house sat dark against the hills. Beyond that, somewhere in the pastures, more animals were dying. "Barn's got clean hay," he said finally. "There's a pump around back. I'll bring bandages." "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet. If that mare's dead by morning, you're off my land." The mare wasn't dead by morning. She was standing at the fence when the sun came up, eating oats from a bucket like she hadn't been wasting away for a week. Boone found Theda asleep in the hay with one hand still resting on the neck of a colicky foal that had also, inexplicably, stopped thrashing sometime during the night. He didn't say anything about it, just left a set of clothes outside the barn. His dead wife's things, he'd explain later, a cotton shirt and canvas trousers and boots that were a size too big, and went to make coffee. Theda changed, washed the mud from her hair at the pump, and walked up to the house like she had any right to be there. She didn't. She knew that. But the alternative was walking back into the wilderness with nothing, and she'd done enough walking. Boone was on the porch with 2 tin cups. He handed her one without looking at her. "Your animals," Theda said. "How many are sick?" 60 head of cattle, 8 horses. Lost 4 already. How long? 3 weeks. It's worse every day. He stared out at the valley, jaw tight. Vet says it's some kind of fever. Wants to quarantine and cull. I can't afford to lose 60 head. I can't afford to lose 10. It's not fever. Theda sipped the coffee. It tasted like it had been boiled in a tin can, which it probably had. It's the water. Something upstream is contaminating it. Mineral runoff, maybe. Chemical. And you know this because you felt it. I know this because every animal drinking from your creek is sick and the ones on well water aren't. That's not fever. That's poison. Boone was quiet for a while. A hawk circled overhead. Wind pushed through the sage. My wife would have figured that out, he said. She was smart like that. Paid attention to things I missed. Theda waited. Phoebe. Died 2 winters ago. Influenza. His voice went flat the way voices do when the pain is too old to be sharp but too deep to be gone. I wasn't here. Was in Sheridan buying feed. Got back and she was already cold. I'm sorry. Everybody's sorry. Doesn't change anything. He stood. You said you can help the animals. I said maybe. Maybe's more than I've got. You can stay. Work for meals and a roof. If you fix what's killing my herd, we'll talk about wages. And if I can't, then we're both out of luck. He set down his cup. I've got a crew of 3. They won't trust you. Don't take it personal, I won't. And Theda? He paused at the door. Whatever happened in Casper, whatever you're running from, it stays your business. I don't ask questions I don't need answers to. The crew didn't trust her. Boone had been right about that. Pascual Medina was the oldest hand, 50-something, wire-thin, with silver in his mustache and eyes that missed nothing. He'd worked the ranch since before Phoebe died, and he looked at Theda the way a man looks at a stray dog. Not hostile, exactly, but not ready to let it inside. Ruthie Kemp was harder to read, a woman in her late 20s doing ranch work in a territory that thought women belonged behind stoves. She wore a pistol on her hip and a permanent scowl and said exactly 4 words to Theda the first day. Don't slow me down. The third hand was a boy named Loomis, barely 18, with sunburned ears and a talent for saying the wrong thing at the wrong time. She really a witch? Loomis whispered to Pascual that first morning, loud enough for Theda to hear. She's a pair of hands, Pascual said. We need hands. Shut up and saddle your horse. They rode out to move the cattle off the contaminated creek. 60 head scattered across 3 miles of rough country, half of them too sick to walk straight. Theda took the drag position behind the herd, eating dust, getting kicked by every stubborn cow that decided she'd rather die than move. By noon, Theda couldn't feel her legs. By sundown, she'd fallen off her horse twice, been stepped on once, and swallowed enough dust to fill a boot. But the herd was on clean water, and when she knelt beside a sick calf that had collapsed on the trail and pressed her hands against its swollen belly, and hummed the low melody her mother used to sing to struggling animals, the calf stood up and walked. Nobody said anything about it. But Theda caught Pascual watching her differently after that, not with trust. That would take longer, but with something adjacent to it. Curiosity, maybe, or the beginning of respect. That night around the campfire, Boone sat beside her and handed her coffee without being asked. The calf, he said. My mother taught me. Your mother teach you to ride drag for 12 hours without complaining? No, that was stubbornness. Good quality out here. He stared into the fire. Theda, what happened to you? The real version, she told him. All of it. Garrett Dunlap and the fake courtship and the stolen money and the wedding that never happened and the town that blamed her for being stupid enough to trust a man who said he loved her. Boone listened without interrupting. When she finished, he was quiet for a long time. Man like that deserves a rope, he said finally. Man like that is probably in Montana by now, doing it to someone else. And you ended up here. I ended up here. Boone poked the fire with a stick. Sparks rose into the black sky. People will talk. Woman living on a bachelor's ranch. You know how that goes. I know how everything goes. I stopped caring. Fair enough. He stood, brushing ash from his knees. Get some sleep. Tomorrow we find whatever's poisoning the water. They found it 2 days later. An old copper mine 3 miles upstream. Abandoned shafts, leaking green-tinged runoff directly into the creek. Boone stared at it with the expression of a man watching his future drain away. This is Langdon's land, he said quietly. Who's Langdon? Victor Langdon. Owns half the territory. Banking, mining, railroad interests. He's been trying to buy my ranch for 2 years. Boone's voice went cold. Now I know why. You think he's poisoning your water on purpose? I think he stopped maintaining those mines when it became cheaper to let them leak. Whether he knows it's killing my stock or just doesn't care. Either way, he wins. I go broke, he buys the land for nothing. Theda looked at the toxic water flowing downstream toward Boone's pastures, toward the animals she'd been fighting to save. Then we stop it, she said. Stopping it meant fencing off the creek, rerouting water from a spring 2 miles south, and doing it all with 3 hands and no money, while 60 head of cattle slowly recovered on clean grazing. They worked 18-hour days. Theda's hands blistered, cracked, bled, and calloused over. She learned to string wire, dig post holes in frozen ground, and read the weather by the way the wind hit the ridgeline. 3 weeks in, she stopped feeling like a guest and started feeling like she belonged. That's when the trouble arrived. A black carriage rolled up to the ranch on a Tuesday morning, pulled by matched horses that cost more than everything Boone owned. The man who stepped out was Victor Langdon himself, tall, silver-haired, immaculate in a charcoal suit that had no business being within 50 miles of cattle country. "Sheridan," Langdon said, smiling like they were old friends. "I heard you've been having some difficulties. Nothing I can't handle." "Of course not. You're a resilient man, that's what I admire about you." Langdon's gaze swept the ranch, the patched fences, the weathered barn, the chickens scratching in the yard. His expression said everything his words didn't. "Though I imagine it must be lonely out here, running a place this size with so little help." His eyes found Theda standing in the barn doorway with manure on her boots and hay in her hair. "And who might this be?" "Ranch hand," Boone said flatly. "How progressive." Langdon's smile sharpened. "I've been hearing interesting things in town, Sheridan. About a woman from Casper. A woman who ran out on a hotel bill and may have been involved in a theft. The description sounds remarkably like your new employee." Theda felt the blood drain from her face. "Get off my land," Boone said. "I'm only concerned for your welfare. A man in your position, widowed, isolated, vulnerable, might not recognize when he's being taken advantage of." Langdon pulled a card from his breast pocket and set it on the fence post. "My offer still stands. Fair price for the property. Think about it." He climbed back into the carriage and was gone, leaving dust and the smell of expensive cologne. Boone picked up the card, tore it in half, and dropped it in the dirt. "He's going to make trouble," Theda said. "He's been making trouble for 2 years. This is just the latest version. I should leave before he uses me against you." Boone turned to face her, and something in his expression made her breath catch. Not anger, not pity, something fiercer. "You're not leaving?" he said. "This is your home now, whether Langdon likes it or not." Langdon didn't like it. Over the next month, the pressure escalated. Whispers spread through town about Theda's past, about her questionable character, about a widow rancher being seduced by a con woman. The general store owner started requiring cash payment instead of credit. The feed supplier raised prices. 2 neighboring ranchers who'd been friendly stopped returning Boone's messages. Then the cattle started disappearing. 3 head the first week, 5 the next. Always the healthiest animals, always from sections of pasture closest to Langdon's property line. "Rustlers," Pasquale said, studying the tracks. "Professional. They know the land. They know because someone's paying them to know," Ruthie said, checking her pistol. Boone gathered everyone in front of the barn. "We ride out at dawn, track them, get our stock back." "All of us?" Loomis asked, voice cracking. "All of us." Theda stepped forward. "Including me, Theda. I can ride. I can shoot. And those are my cattle, too." Something shifted in Boone's expression. He nodded once. They followed the tracks into the Badlands east of the ranch, through country so rough the horses had to pick their way between boulders and drop-offs. By midday, they'd found the cattle, penned in a box canyon with a makeshift fence across the mouth. They'd also found the men guarding them. The first shot came from the canyon rim. It hit the rock beside Theda's head, showering her face with stone chips. Her horse reared. She grabbed the saddle horn and held on while the world exploded into noise and chaos. "Down!" Boone's voice cut through it. "Behind the rocks!" Theda threw herself from the saddle. Her rifle hit the ground and skittered away. She crawled behind a boulder while bullets sparked off stone around her, heart slamming so hard she could feel it in her teeth. Pasquale dragged her deeper into cover. "Stay low." "How many?" 3, maybe 4. High ground. He fired upward, the report deafening in the narrow space. They were pinned. The shooters had position impatience. Going forward was suicide. Going back meant crossing open ground. "This isn't rustling," a voice called from above. "This is a message. Leave the woman and ride out. She's what this is about." Theda's stomach dropped. Boone's response was immediate. "Over my dead body. That can be arranged." More gunfire. Concentrated, deliberate. They were trying to flush Boone out, make him expose himself. Theda's mind went clear the way it did when she was diagnosing a sick animal. cold, focused. She could see the whole situation like a diagram. The angles, the options, the single move that might save everyone. I'll go out, she said. Draw their attention. Give you time to move. Absolutely not. They want me alive. They need me alive to frame me. That buys time. Theda, listen to me. No. Her voice didn't shake. She was surprised by that. You've given me everything. A home, a chance, a reason to stop running. I'm not going to sit here and watch you die for me. Boone grabbed her arm. And I'm not going to let you walk into a death trap to save my pride. We find another way. There is no other way. She stood before he could stop her, hands up, unarmed. Stepped into the open with her heart hammering so hard it hurt. The shooting stopped. Smart girl, the voice called. Keep walking. She walked. Every step felt like the last one. Behind her, she heard Boone swearing, heard Pasquale pulling him toward the horses. She didn't look back. Rough hands grabbed her. Rope around her wrists, a hood over her head. She was lifted onto a horse, and they rode for what felt like hours, while her body ached and her mind raced through every terrible possibility. They brought her to an abandoned line shack. 3 men. The leader was thick-necked with a scar across his chin, the other 2 younger, nervous, checking the door every few minutes. Here's how it works, Scarface said. You write a letter. Say you stole money from Sheridan's accounts and you're running east. Make it sound real, and if I refuse? Then things get ugly, and your rancher friend stops getting warnings and starts getting bullets. Theda looked at the paper and pencil they'd thrown on the floor. Her wrists were bleeding where the rope had bitten in. Her head throbbed from the canyon ambush. She was terrified. But she was also her mother's daughter, she wrote. Not what they wanted. Something else entirely. A message only Boone would understand. The gray mare isn't eating. Check the water at the South Spring. Everything else is a lie. Scarface read it, and his face darkened. This isn't what I told you to write. It's what you're getting. His hand went to his gun. Theda's breath stopped. Then hoofbeats. Getting louder. Fast. Someone's coming, one of the younger men said, panicking. Theda grabbed the pencil and drove it into Scarface's knee. He screamed. She was already moving, through the door, into blinding daylight, running on legs that barely worked while gunshots cracked behind her. And there was Boone, riding hard, rifle up, Pasquale and Ruthie flanking him. He swung down before the horse stopped, caught her as her legs gave out. I've got you, he said roughly. I've got you. They rode out in a chaos of gunfire and shouting. One of the men was captured, the youngest, who broke faster than wet paper under Pasquale's questioning. He gave up everything. Langdon's foreman had hired them. Langdon's money had paid them. The goal was simple. Frame Theda, destroy Boone's credibility, force the sale. Boone filed charges with the federal marshal, not the local sheriff, who owed Langdon favors, but the circuit marshal out of Cheyenne, who owed nothing to nobody. The trial took 1 day. Langdon's hired witnesses crumbled under questioning when bank records showed payments from his accounts. Langdon himself sat stone-faced in the gallery, while his careful scheme unraveled thread by thread. He'd expected to break a rancher and a runaway. He hadn't expected them to fight back. When the judge dismissed the charges and ordered a federal investigation into Langdon's mining operations, the courtroom erupted. Boone stood in the middle of the noise and said, loud enough for everyone to hear, that Theda Kinney had saved his ranch, his animals, and his life, and anyone who had a problem with her could take it up with him directly. Theda waited for him outside. The autumn sun was warm. She could hear birds. You told the whole town I saved your life, she said. You did. That's going to make things complicated. Things were already complicated. He stepped closer. Theda, I need to say something, and I'm going to say it badly because I'm not good at this. Then say it badly. Somewhere in the last 2 months, you became the reason I get up in the morning. Not the ranch. Not the cattle. You. His voice cracked. And I know you've got every reason not to trust a man who says things like that. I know what Garrett did to you. But I'm not him. I don't have fancy words or promises. I just have this land and this life, and the fact that I'd rather lose all of it than lose you. Theda's eyes burned. She blinked hard. I need time, she whispered. I need to figure out who I am when I'm not running. Take all the time you need. I'll be right here. She took 4 months. 4 months of working the ranch, healing the last of the sick cattle, teaching Loomis how to gentle a frightened horse, arguing with Ruthie about fence placement, sitting on the porch with Pasquale while he told stories about his father's ranch in Sonora. 4 months of watching Boone prove his words with actions, every day, without fail, without pressure. On a cold evening in February, with snow falling soft and steady, Theda found him in the barn, checking on a pregnant mare. She stood in the doorway for a moment, watching him work. Gentle hands, quiet voice, the same patience he showed every living thing on this ranch. Boone. He looked up. I think I'm done running, she said. Something in his face cracked open. Hope, raw and unguarded. Yeah? She walked toward him, closed the distance, and kissed him in the lamplight with snow blowing through the barn door and the horses shifting in their stalls. It wasn't graceful. Her hands shook. His arms came around her solid and sure. And for the first time since Garrett Dunlap had shattered her faith in every word a man could say, Theda Kinney felt safe. They married in spring. No church. Neither of them wanted one. Just the ranch yard with wildflowers, pushing through the last patches of snow. Pasquale stood as witness. Ruthie wore a dress for the first and probably last time. Loomis cried, which he'd deny forever. The ranch became known across the territory as a place where broken things healed. Theda had a gift. People said it quietly, reverently, for knowing what ailed a creature before any vet could name it. Ranchers brought their dying livestock from 100 miles away, and sometimes it wasn't livestock that showed up at the gate, but people, women with bruised faces and empty eyes, men with nothing left, families burned out of homes and hope. Theda always found room. Years later, a girl appeared at the fence. 19, maybe 20, wearing a dress that had been fine once but was now torn and filthy. Her lip was split. Her hands were shaking. Please, the girl said. I don't have anywhere else. Theda looked at her and saw the river, saw the mud, saw the ruined wedding dress and the bleeding hands and the absolute certainty that nothing good would ever happen again. Come inside, Theda said. You're safe here. She led the girl to the kitchen, gave her food and water, wrapped a blanket around her shoulders and sat with her while she cried. Everyone says I'm ruined, the girl whispered. That no one decent will ever want me. Theda thought about the woman who'd crawled out of the Powder River with nothing. No money, no name, no future. Who'd been called a witch and a thief and a liar. Who'd been hunted and jailed and nearly killed. And who'd built a life anyway, out of stubbornness and work and the refusal to let the world's cruelty be the final word. You're not ruined, Theda said. You're just beginning. And beginning is the hardest part, but it's also where everything good starts. Outside, the sun was setting over the ranch Theda Kinney Sheridan had helped build from nothing. Horses grazed in pastures she'd fenced with her own bleeding hands. Cattle drank from springs she'd rerouted to save their lives. And somewhere in the barn, Boone was whistling while he worked, the way he did every evening, the sound carrying across the yard like a promise, kept so many times it had become as ordinary and essential as breathing. She wasn't the girl in the river anymore. She was home.